if an organisation is bound by the New South Wales threshold, 50 to 100, the organisation may elect to report to the Commonwealth instead of New South Wales. But if they do that, the New South Wales penalty provision may well still apply. That provision extends to lodgement of modern slavery statements. So if an organisation should report and they don't, there's the potential for a penalty. And additionally, there may be a penalty if an organisation provides a modern slavery statement that contains false or misleading information. So the penalty provision is one of the key differences between the New South Wales and the Commonwealth scheme. But our approach in New South Wales will be to support businesses that should report and don't. We will be reaching out to those businesses and raising awareness about the New South Wales Modern Slavery Act. And it's not our intention to refer to a penalty in the first instance. Rather, there would be dialogue and discussion and support of business. The penalty that could come into play if an organisation deliberately provides a statement that contains false or misleading information is significant. But again, our intention would be to look at that where there is some absolute intention to provide fraudulent information. So that particular part of the New South Wales penalty scheme will apply in New South Wales, but also if an organisation elects to report to the Commonwealth instead of New South Wales. So in that way, the schemes are different. We have different thresholds, and New South Wales does have the penalty provision in place.
What strikes me though with this legislation and the aspect of modern slavery is that some of our members will be sitting there thinking, well, my organisation doesn't have any modern slavery, so my statement's going to be pretty easy. I don't have anything much I need to do. Now, that's actually not going to be the case, is it? The legislation isn't just about sort of very much just looking very internally in terms of the organisation. There's actually a need to look through supply chains and actually consider modern slavery and the business of modern slavery more broadly. Is that right? Yeah.
So it has been an interesting journey, this whole process, thinking about the risk of modern slavery in the supply chain of Australian organisations. And when we start out considering these issues, most of us will probably think that slavery is something that happens overseas, and that if we have a business that is essentially a desk-based business, providing professional services, then the likelihood of modern slavery is low. But it turns out that when we start to look at these things in greater detail, we can identify a risk of modern slavery in all sorts of sectors and in all sorts of ways that might not have been anticipated when the scheme first came into play. We know in Australia that there are risks in labour. In contract labour, we know that there are particular sectors that do have a very high level of exploitation and may be, in fact, susceptible to modern slavery. And those sectors could include the hospitality industry, the cleaning industry, security and construction. So what that means for any of us who are working in an office and doing essentially desk-based work is we need to think about the risk of modern slavery in our operations and in our supply chain. What that means is we need to think about how people are employed, whether they're employed directly, where there's a whole series of subcontractors involved in producing services. I want to give you an example of that I've heard about quite recently, and that is in the case of a supermarket, a very well-known supermarket that entered into a contractual agreement with a company to provide cleaning services for the supermarket. The contractor subcontracted, and the subcontractor subcontracted again. Then there was a reaching out by a person who hadn't been paid for 3 months. So, whether that is slavery or whether it is gross abuse of Australia's employment law framework, there is something wrong. So the tip for all of us is to think about, you know, how we employ people in our operations. There are sectors that are at a higher risk of exploitation when compared to other sectors, and you know, that really should be a red flag. That's just an example of where there could be a risk of modern slavery just in the operations of a business that is essentially desk-based.